After narrowly escaping death, I ran into the son I hadn't seen in years. He was taller now, and the cold disgust that used to fill his eyes was replaced by regret and desperate longing. He looked cautiously at me as he said, "Mom, I miss your home-cooked meal so much." I ignored him, haggling heatedly with a seller at the farmer's market. He bent down to pick up 2 onions that had dropped from my grocery bag. "If you were alive, why didn't you come back?" Dad said the past is in the past. He forgives you. I let out an irritated click of my tongue, slapped 2 bills on the counter, and walked off. Suddenly, he yanked the hem of my shirt tightly. "Mom, are you abandoning us? Are you giving up on our family?" I didn't answer. Hearing him say Mom was utterly grating to my ears. The moment they chose to save that other woman and leave me during that shipwreck, every last shred of my feelings for them had vanished. With a sharp tug, I yanked the hem of my shirt out of his grip. Grabbing my grocery bag, I kept walking, heading straight into the rundown heart of the neighborhood. Ben Hoffman, however, refused to give up. Trailing close behind me in his limited edition sneakers, he tiptoed around the puddles with every stride. "Mom, stop ignoring me," he shouted from behind, his voice heavy with grievance. I cut into a narrow alley, where the plaster on the walls was peeling away, exposing the blackened brick underneath. Ben hurried to catch up, his brows knit tight as he looked around in total disgust. "You live here?" He pointed up at the chaotic web of overhead power lines and the dripping clotheslines hanging beside us. "Just to throw a fit at Dad. You've reduced yourself to looking like this. Is it really worth it?" I looked at him, my expression annoyed. 5 years had passed since I last saw him. He was taller now, his features the spitting image of Army Hoffman's, even that arrogant, self-righteous tone he'd inherited from his good-for-nothing father. "Get out of my way." Ben froze, clearly not expecting me to be this distant. Years ago, a single frown from him would have sent me into a panic, doing whatever it took just to make him smile. "I won't." He stubbornly dug in his heels, reaching out to snatch the grocery bag straight from my hands. Just come home with me." Dad said that as long as you're willing to apologize, he'll let you move back. Whatever happened in the past is over. Even Rosie said she hopes our family can be whole again. I sidestepped his hand and kept moving toward the stairwell. Ben glanced at the pitch-black entryway, instinctively shrinking back and covering his nose and mouth at the stench. Just then, the low hum of an engine echoed from the mouth of the alley. A Maybach pulled up to the curb, forcing the passing cyclist to swerve out of its path. Ben's eyes lit up and he turned, running straight toward it. "Dad, Mom's right here." "But she won't come with me." Army stepped out of the car. He locked eyes with me and started walking over. Rosie Lawrence was right behind him, clinging lightly to his arm, as if she barely had the strength to stand on her own. Once Army was 3 steps away from me, he stopped and looked down at me with condescension. "Are you done making a scene? Since you're not dead, why haven't you come home for 5 years? Do you have any idea how much Hoffman Group stock price fluctuated back then because of the news of your death?" I stared at the man I had spent 10 years loving, feeling completely calm inside. Rosie gently tugged on Army's sleeve, her voice dripping with soft concern. "Army, don't be so hard on her. Freya must have suffered out here on her own, so it's only natural she's holding a grudge. Freya, don't be so stubborn either. Ben missed you so much over these years." He was even calling out for his mom in his sleep. Ben nodded, his eyes welling up with tears. "Yeah, Mom. Although Rosie is really good to me, she's not my mom. I still want you." I didn't respond, which made Army's frown deepen even more. "If you come back with me, right? Now behave yourself and take proper care of Rosie and Ben. I won't hold you accountable for faking your death and running away. The position of Mrs. Hoffman is still yours." I almost laughed out loud at the sheer ridiculousness of it all. To him, kicking me off the boat 5 years ago for his mistress was just a necessary evil. The fact that I had survived and hadn't crawled back to thank him made me ungrateful. I dropped my grocery bag on the ground. A tomato smashed against Army's leather shoes, flattering bright red juice everywhere. Army took a quick step back, his face flushing with anger. "Freya, don't push your luck when I'm being nice to you." I clapped the dust off my hands, my eyes full of contempt. "Who gives a damn about being Mrs. Hoffman? Take your mistress and your precious son, and get the hell out of my sight right now. Trash isn't welcome here." Army's face instantly darkened in his memory. I was always meek, and submissive. Even back when he brought his mistress home, all I ever did was hide in the kitchen, silently wiping away tears before bringing out a lavish, home-cooked dinner. "I see you've stayed in this low-class slum for so long that you've forgotten basic decency." Seeing the tension escalate, Ben rushed to grab Army's hand. Then he turned to look at me, his face filled with utter disappointment. "Mom, how can you speak to Dad like that? You used to listen to Dad all the time. Whatever he said went. Can't you just yield for once? Do you really have to make everyone miserable?" Rosie let go of Army's arm and walked over to me. She reached out, attempting to take my hand, but I sidestepped her. Her hand froze in midair before she pulled it back, awkwardly. "Freya, look at your hands." Her gaze landed on the rough skin on the back of my hands, which were covered in tiny cuts and calluses. "You used to play the piano with these hands. You took better care of them than your own face. How did they end up like this?" She covered her mouth, feigning deep sympathy for me. "Living this way must be so hard, right? Having to penny pinch every single day over basic groceries, even arguing with people for $2. Why put yourself through all this suffering?" Army's sighs lingered on my hands for a second. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a black credit card, holding it out to me. "Go clean yourself up and buy some decent clothes. We're hosting a dinner party at home tonight. I will announce your return to the public and clear up the misunderstanding from back then." I stared at the credit card, and my memory was suddenly yanked back to 5 years ago. It was our 10th wedding anniversary, and I had spent a whole month carefully preparing a surprise for him. I had even sold the heirloom jewelry my mother left me, just to buy him a limited edition watch. When I held out the gift in front of him, my heart overflowing with joy, as I tried to hand it over, Rosie suddenly pointed at the necklace around my neck and gasped. "Wow, this necklace would go so perfectly with my dress." That necklace was Army's wedding anniversary gift to me. Without saying a word, Army unclasped the necklace with his own hands. Since you like it, Rosie, it's yours. I stood there frozen in place, holding my gift, feeling like an absolute joke. Back then, I actually swallowed my pride and endured it, continuing to play the role of the dutiful wife and loving mother. It wasn't until the shipwreck happened, and I was shoved straight into the sea, that I finally realized that I wasn't even worth a single strand of Rosie's hair. In this man's heart, looking at the credit card in front of me now, I felt nothing but pure irony. I smacked the card out of his hand so hard that my palm went numb. Get lost, Army. Space turned ashen, the veins on his temples pulsing violently. Hiya, have you lost your mind? Do you honestly think I'm begging you to come back? I let out a cold laugh and turned around to leave. I don't need your money or your charity. Take your filthy cash and get the hell out of my life. After that day, the Hoffman stopped bothering me. I went back to my usual busy routine at the docks, counting the fresh off the boat, frozen seafood shipments, and hauling them to the alley warehouse to await pickup. During a quick break, I pulled out my phone and browsed through the local news to check on the current seafood market prices. The headline at the top of the newsfeed caught my eye. Hoffman Group to host charity gala tonight. Chairman Army Hoffman to publicly address wife's miraculous return. I almost laughed. He had already prepared a script for my life without even asking me. The article painted him as a grieving husband who had spent 5 years searching for his missing wife. It praised Rosie Lawrence for standing faithfully by the Hoffman family during their darkest days and described Ben as a child who had never stopped waiting for his mother. There wasn't a single mention of the shipwreck. Not one word about who had been left behind in the freezing ocean. I closed the article and checked the seafood prices instead. Bluefin tuna had gone up another 8%. That was much more useful information. Freya, Old Chin waved at me from across the warehouse. The buyer from Harbor Restaurant wants another 100 kilos. Can you deliver them yourself? No problem. I loaded the crates onto a battered tricycle and pedaled toward the restaurant. Compared to the glamorous life I once lived in the Hoffman mansion, this work was exhausting. By noon, my back ached. My palms burned. But every dollar I earned belonged to me. No one could take it away. As I finished unloading the final crate, the restaurant manager hurried outside. Miss Freya, wait. He ran over holding an envelope. The client specifically asked me to give this to you. I frowned. Who? He pointed toward a black Rolls-Royce parked across the street. The gentleman over there. The rear window slowly rolled down. Inside sat an elegant man in a charcoal suit. He looked to be in his early 30s, his features refined, his posture relaxed. Unlike Army's overbearing arrogance, this man simply watched quietly. Our eyes met. He gave a polite nod. I walked over. You know me? He smiled faintly. I should. You saved my life 5 years ago. My footsteps stopped. He continued calmly. The day of the shipwreck. You probably don't remember. I was trapped beneath a collapsed railing. You cut the ropes holding the debris, even though the ship was already sinking. I escaped. You disappeared. My memories slowly resurfaced. There had been too much chaos that day. People screaming. The ship tilting. Ice-cold seawater flooding every deck. I vaguely remembered helping a stranger before searching desperately for Ben. Then, Army had chosen Rosie. And someone had shoved me overboard. I remember now, I said quietly. It was nothing. He shook his head. To you maybe. To me, it was everything. He stepped out of the car and extended a business card. My name is Adrian Sinclair. I've been looking for you. I glanced at the card. Sinclair Shipping International. President. The largest seafood importer in the province. I've been buying seafood from this district for months. Adrian continued. I heard there was a woman here whose bookkeeping was perfect, who never cheated a fisherman out of a single cent, and who could identify the quality of frozen seafood with one glance. I didn't realize it was you until today. Old Chin suddenly rushed over, nearly tripping over himself. President Sinclair, his face turned pale. Had I known you were coming personally, I would have. Adrian raised a hand, stopping him. I'm here for Miss Freya. Old Chin stared at me in disbelief. You know President Sinclair? I do now, I answered. Adrian looked at me. I owe you my life. I also happen to need someone capable. If you're interested, I'd like to hire you. I can offer 3 times what you're making here. I'll also provide housing. Before I could answer, another familiar voice exploded across the street. Freya. A Maybach screeched to a stop so abruptly that its tires left black marks on the road. Army stormed out. Behind him, Rosie and Ben hurried after him. Army's eyes swept between Adrian and me before settling on the business card still in my hand. His expression immediately turned stormy. So this is why you refused to come home. You already found yourself another man. Rosie covered her mouth in mock shock. Freya. I never imagined. Ben stared at me in disbelief. Mom, you told me you didn't need anyone. So, why are you accepting gifts from another uncle? Adrian frowned. His calm expression disappeared. He looked directly at Army. Mr. Hoffman, I suggest you watch your words. Army sneered. This is a family matter. Adrian slipped one hand into his pocket. No, it's a harassment matter. Freya has already told you to leave her alone. If you continue bothering her, my legal team will be happy to explain the consequences. Army narrowed his eyes. And who exactly are you to interfere? Adrian answered without hesitation. The man whose life she saved. And unlike you, I don't forget the people who saved me. Army's face stiffened. The person who saved you? He looked at me as if he had just heard the world's biggest joke. Freya couldn't even swim. Adrian's gaze turned icy. Exactly. She couldn't swim. But she still went back into a sinking ship to pull a complete stranger free. He took one slow step forward. Tell me, Mr. Hoffman, if a woman who couldn't swim was found floating alone in the ocean after that disaster, where was her husband? Silence. The dock workers nearby had already stopped unloading cargo. Even the restaurant staff were pretending to wipe tables while shamelessly listening. Army's expression darkened. I don't need to explain my family's affairs to an outsider. You don't, Adrian replied evenly. But if you're going to slander Miss Freya in public, I won't ignore it. Rosie suddenly stepped forward, tears already welling in her eyes. President Sinclair, you've misunderstood. Army searched for Freya for years. We all thought she had died. She looked at me pitifully. Freya, please explain it to him. Don't let him misunderstand Army. I couldn't help laughing. Rosie's expression froze. It was the first genuine laugh I'd had in years. You really haven't changed. Whenever you're cornered, you start crying. You let everyone else speak for you while pretending to be the kindest person in the room. Rosie's lips trembled. I wasn't. No. You never are. When you wanted my anniversary necklace, you only said it matched your dress. When you wanted my husband, you only said you admired him. When you wanted my son, you only said you wanted to help take care of him. You never ask. You just stand there looking innocent until someone gives you what belongs to someone else. Every word landed like a slap. Rosie's face gradually lost its color. Ben frowned. Mom, don't talk about Aunt Rosie like that. Aunt Rosie never stole anything. She's always been kind. I looked at the boy I carried for 10 months. The boy whose fevers I'd stayed awake through. The boy whose favorite lunches I'd memorized before he could even read. Now he looked at me as though I were the villain. I nodded. You're right. She didn't steal. Everything was handed to her willingly. Ben relaxed, thinking I'd admitted I was wrong. Then I continued. Your father gave her my jewelry, my bedroom, my position, my family, and eventually, my son. Ben's face turned pale. For 5 years, I said calmly, who did you celebrate Mother's Day with? Ben opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Who attended your school events? Rosie. When you got sick, who stayed beside your bed? Rosie. When people asked who your mother was? His face turned completely white. He couldn't answer, because everyone already knew. He had introduced Rosie as his mother countless times. I didn't need him to admit it. His silence was answer enough. A tear rolled down his cheek. I was little. You were. So I don't blame you. His eyes brightened slightly. Then I finished. But I also don't owe you anything anymore. Those words hit him far harder than if I'd shouted. His shoulders shook. No, I'm your son. I corrected him gently. The day your father chose another woman over my life, I lost my husband. The day you chose to call that woman Mom, I lost my son. Ben stumbled backward as though someone had punched him. His face crumpled. No, I didn't mean it. He desperately reached toward me. I still love you. I stepped back before he could touch me. Children grow up. So, do mothers. I've already grown out of needing this family. The doc had gone completely silent. Even Army looked stunned. He had expected me to cry, to argue, to beg for my son back. Instead, I had let him go. For the first time since arriving, a trace of panic flashed through his eyes. Freya. His voice softened unconsciously. Enough. You've vented your anger. Come home. We can start over. I looked at him, as if he were speaking nonsense. Start over? He nodded. I'll explain everything that happened 5 years ago. I'll compensate you. I'll give you back your position. I smiled. You still don't understand. I don't want compensation. I want nothing that belongs to the Hoffman family. I don't want your money. I don't want your mansion. I don't even want your surname. Army's pupils contracted. What did you say? I've already filed the paperwork declaring myself legally alive. The next document my lawyer files will be for divorce. Rosie's head snapped toward Army. His expression finally cracked. For the first time in 5 years, the confident chairman of Hoffman Group looked genuinely rattled. You divorce me? I met his gaze without a hint of hesitation. Yes. And don't worry. I won't ask for a single cent of your fortune. I just want one thing. Army frowned. What? I smiled coldly. The truth about the shipwreck. When this divorce reaches court, I'll make sure everyone learns exactly how Mrs. Hoffman ended up in the ocean while her husband sailed away. Army's expression finally changed. For the first time, the calm superiority disappeared. What nonsense are you talking about? The accident was investigated years ago. It was an unavoidable disaster. I laughed. Unavoidable. I looked him up and down with open disdain. The storm was unavoidable. The shipwreck was unavoidable. But you throwing your wife away like yesterday's garbage? That was a choice. The dock workers exchanged glances. Several had quietly taken out their phones. Rosie's eyes flickered. Freya, please don't twist the facts. No one pushed you. No one. I cut her off. You were screaming that you couldn't swim. You clung to Army's neck so tightly, he could barely move. You cried that you wanted to live. I smiled mockingly. Funny. I remember you swimming just fine when you were vacationing in the Maldives a year later. Rosie's face froze. The dock workers immediately started whispering. She can swim. Didn't she just say she couldn't? I saw those pictures online. Rosie hurriedly shook her head. I only learned afterward. Really? What remarkable talent. You mastered swimming well enough to post underwater photographs within a year. Rosie bit her lip, so hard it turned white. Army stepped protectively in front of her. Enough. I won't allow you to bully Rosie. I burst out laughing. Bully, you've mistaken me for someone else. The woman you could bully died 5 years ago. The one standing here now simply enjoys telling the truth. Army's jaw tightened. You've become impossible. No, I've become impossible to manipulate. I pointed at his tailored suit. Tell me, does that expensive suit make you feel like a decent man? Because from where I'm standing, it's just wrapping expensive fabric around rotten trash. The doc erupted into muffled snickers. Army's face turned dark red. You. And you. I looked straight at Rosie. I've met shameless people before. But you're in a league of your own. You never worked for anything. You just wandered around collecting whatever belonged to other women. My necklace. My husband. My son. She looked as though she'd been slapped. I never wanted to replace you. No. You just conveniently accepted every gift. If someone handed you my coffin back then, you probably would have thanked them for the thoughtful present. Rosie's tears immediately spilled over. Army. She leaned against him weakly. Army glared at me. Apologize. I blinked. To her? Certainly. I took one step closer. Rosie's hopeful expression appeared for a split second. Then I smiled. I'm sorry. That I didn't stay dead. Silence. Rosie's smile vanished. I continued calmly. If I had drowned that day, the two of you would have lived happily ever after. You could have married without pretending to mourn. Ben would have happily called her mom. And everyone would have praised your perfect little family. What a pity. I'm alive. And every time you look at me, I'm living proof of what kind of people you really are. Army clenched his fists. You think anyone will believe you? They all know I'm devoted to my family. They know Hoffman Group's reputation. I shrugged. Your reputation? It's built on money. Character isn't. I looked at Ben. As for you, his eyes were already red. I know you think I'm cruel. I know you think she's kind. But kindness isn't taking another woman's place while she's still alive. And love isn't abandoning your own mother because someone richer tucked you into bed. Ben shook his head, frantically. I was a child. You were. And now you're old enough to understand. So understand this. I pointed toward Army. That man taught you that people with power are always right. I pointed toward Rosie. That woman taught you that if you cry sweetly enough, someone else will pay the price. Then I pointed at myself. And I taught you how to cook. How to tie your shoes. How to read bedtime stories. You forgot all of that the moment someone offered you a bigger house. Ben covered his face, sobbing openly. I'm sorry. I really missed you. I sighed. You don't miss me. You miss being forgiven. His crying stopped. I continued mercilessly. If I walked back into the Hoffman mansion today, you'd all breathe a sigh of relief. Not because you love me. Because then you wouldn't have to feel guilty anymore. I refuse to be the medicine for your guilty conscience. Adrian, who had remained silent until now, looked at the three members of the Hoffman family before speaking. Mr. Hoffman, if I were you, I'd leave. Army laughed coldly. And why should I? Because, Adrian replied, you're standing in the middle of a public dock, surrounded by workers who have just heard your wife accuse you of abandoning her during a shipwreck. He glanced around. Half of them have already recorded everything. Almost instinctively, everyone lowered their phones. Too late. Army turned and saw the glowing screens. His expression changed dramatically. He suddenly realized this confrontation was no longer just a private family dispute. If the recording spread, questions about the shipwreck would resurface. Questions Hoffman Group had spent 5 years burying. By that evening, the videos had spread across every major social media platform. Hoffman Group chairman accused of abandoning wife during shipwreck. Dead wife returns after 5 years. Did the Hoffman family lie? Public opinion exploded overnight. People dug up the old news reports and quickly noticed something strange. Every article from 5 years ago focused on Army mourning his wife. None explained how she had fallen into the sea while everyone else had been rescued. The Hoffman Group stock opened the next morning down nearly 10%. Investors flooded the company with questions. Army spent the entire day putting out fires while the board demanded answers. Meanwhile, I continued working at the docks as though nothing had happened. 3 days later, my lawyer called. Miss Freya. Your divorce papers have been accepted. And someone anonymously sent us evidence. What evidence? Security footage from the cruise ship. I froze. The cameras weren't destroyed? Apparently not. One backup server survived. My grip tightened around the phone. What's on it? There are several clips. They don't show everything, but they clearly show Mr. Hoffman pulling Rosie onto the last rescue boat. And the footage also shows you reaching for Ben before someone shoved you backward. I can't identify who pushed you, but the video proves you were left behind. For the first time in 5 years, the truth finally had proof. The court hearing arrived much sooner than anyone expected. Army walked in surrounded by lawyers. Rosie wore a mask and sunglasses to avoid the reporters. Ben kept his head down the entire time. When the footage was played in court, the room fell silent. The screen showed Army dragging Rosie toward the lifeboat. It showed me shouting Ben's name. It showed my outstretched hand. Then, a violent shove. I disappeared into the ocean. The video ended. Army's lead attorney immediately stood. My client did not push his wife. He simply made an emergency decision during a disaster. My lawyer smiled. We never claimed he pushed her. We're asking a much simpler question. If Mrs. Hoffman survived, why did Mr. Hoffman never report that she had been left in the water alive? And why did he publicly declare her dead before a complete investigation? Army couldn't answer. Neither could his lawyers. A week later, the court granted the divorce. I walked out with nothing. No alimony. No shares. No mansion. Just my freedom. The judge looked genuinely surprised. You aren't seeking any compensation? I smiled. I've already paid enough. The scandal continued to grow. Several shareholders sued Hoffman Group for misleading investors. The board forced Army to step down as chairman until the investigation concluded. Within a month, he lost control of the company he had spent decades building. Rosie became the target of relentless public criticism. Every luxury item she wore was compared to something that had once belonged to me. Unable to bear the pressure, she quietly left the Hoffman mansion. Even then, the internet mocked her. Now that there's nothing left to steal, where will she go? Ben tried to visit me several times. Each time, I politely refused to see him. Eventually he stopped coming. I later heard he had moved abroad to study. Whether out of guilt or shame, I didn't know, nor did I care. As for me, I accepted Adrian Sinclair's offer. Within 2 years, I transformed Sinclair Shipping's seafood division into the largest importer on the eastern coast. The small apartment in the alley became a spacious home, overlooking the harbor. Every morning, I drank coffee while watching ships come and go. The sea that had nearly taken my life had ultimately given me a new one. One afternoon, my assistant entered my office. President Freya. Hoffman Group has filed for bankruptcy protection. I simply signed another contract without even looking up. Noted. The Hoffman family had once been my entire world. Now, they weren't even worth a second glance. The Hoffman family became the favorite topic of every financial news program. Once the symbol of success, they were now held up as an example of how quickly arrogance could destroy a dynasty. The investigation into the shipwreck never resulted in criminal charges, but the evidence was enough to destroy public trust. Investors pulled out. Banks tightened credit. Major partners quietly ended their contracts. Within a year, Hoffman Group officially declared bankruptcy. The mansion that had hosted lavish galas was seized to repay creditors. Luxury cars were auctioned. Designer watches, paintings, antiques, even Army's prized wine collection, were sold one piece at a time. The family that had once looked down on my little apartment was forced into a rented condominium barely a tenth the size of their old home. Army aged almost overnight. His tailored suits were replaced with off-the-rack jackets. The board members who had once flattered him stopped answering his calls. Friends disappeared. Business partners crossed the street to avoid greeting him. He tried starting a new company several times. Every investor gave the same answer. We don't invest in people who abandon their own families. The words became his curse. One rainy afternoon, he stood outside a bank after being rejected yet again. Across the street, a giant electronic billboard played an interview with me. I was announcing Sinclair Shipping's newest international expansion. The interviewer smiled. President Freya, you've become one of the country's most respected entrepreneurs. What's your greatest achievement? I answered calmly, leaving the wrong people behind. Army stood in the rain long after the interview ended. Rosie discovered that being Mrs. Hoffman had been the only reason people tolerated her. Without wealth or status, even the socialites who once called her sister blocked her number. She tried finding work. No luxury brand wanted someone whose name had become synonymous with scandal. She opened an online live stream to sell beauty products. The comments flooded in. Selling someone else's lipstick too? Careful. She might steal the host's husband next. Hide your jewelry. She broke down crying during the broadcast. The stream ended after less than 10 minutes. No company approached her again. Ben suffered the most at school. No one cared that he had been a child during the shipwreck. To his classmates, he was simply the son who had called another woman mom, while his own mother was fighting to survive. Whispers followed him everywhere. That's him. The ungrateful son. I heard his real mother refused to see him. His grades plummeted. The cheerful boy who had once been captain of every school club became quiet and withdrawn. Every Mother's Day was torture. Other students bought flowers and gifts. Ben would sit alone, staring at his phone. He typed countless messages. Mom, I'm sorry. Can we talk? He never sent them. He knew he had no right. The family slowly turned against one another. Army blamed Rosie. If you hadn't insisted on getting on that lifeboat. Rosie screamed back. You chose me. I never forced you. If you'd loved your wife so much, why didn't you save her? Army had no answer. They argued almost every day. Eventually, Rosie packed her bags and left. Before walking out, she looked at Army with red eyes. You know, the one who ruined your family wasn't me. It was you. The apartment door slammed shut. Army never saw her again. Months later, Army was eating instant noodles alone in the dim apartment. He opened an old drawer looking for chopsticks. Instead, he found a faded recipe notebook. Every page was filled with my handwriting. Ben likes less ginger. Army prefers soup simmered for 3 hours. Remember to warm his milk before bed. Grease stains covered the pages from years of use. Army stared at the notebook for a long time. Then, for the first time in his life, he cooked one of the recipes. The soup tasted awful. He finally understood. Those meals had never been ordinary. They had been 10 years of quiet love. And he had traded them away. One winter afternoon, Army happened to pass the harbor. A black luxury sedan stopped nearby. I stepped out with Adrian. We were discussing a new shipping terminal while several executives followed behind us. I laughed at something Adrian said. It was a carefree laugh. One Army had never heard during our marriage. He instinctively took a step toward me. Freya. Before he could get closer, security politely blocked his path. I'm sorry, sir. You can't approach President Sinclair without an appointment. Army looked at me desperately. Freya. I just wanted to apologize. I paused, turned my head, looked at him for exactly 1 second. Then I said only 4 words. I accept your apology. Hope flashed across his face. Before he could speak again, I continued. But forgiveness isn't reconciliation. I've forgiven you for my own peace, not for your comfort. I turned and walked away without another glance. Army remained standing in the cold sea breeze until sunset, watching the woman who had once spent every day waiting.
And if you like what you're watching, don't forget to like and subscribe.